This week, the company that we founded was sold for an estimated $300 million. And this is how we did it. What's up guys, Damian Keyes here, welcome back to the channel. And this channel is dedicated to musicians who are serious about releasing music, building an audience, and on top of that, building a career. So if that is you, then hit that subscribe button and come and be a part of this community. But today, we are talking about hundreds of millions of dollars. So in case you don't know, BIMM is a group of music colleges which started off in Brighton and now is in 7 other locations all across Europe with an annual turnover of $60 million. Just think about that for a minute. This is a company that started off in my living room with a computer that we got for free from a charity, has just been sold for $300 million. In my head, that's crazy, but this shows that if you've got a dream, if you're there thinking, I want my music or my business to take over the world, why can't that happen? And I am living proof that that actually can happen. Let me tell you the story. So it all started when I was 19 years old. I'd just come out of a failed record deal and I knew I had a lot to learn and I didn't want to stay in the city that I lived, which was Swansea in Wales. So I moved near London to learn and started at a music college, which was the very first year of a music college called the Academy of Contemporary Music, with 44 students on the first year, 6 bass players, and I absolutely loved it. And they asked me to stay on as a teacher for the second year, and then over the next few years I became part of the management team which helped that college grow. Now, on the very first day, I met an incredibly inspirational guy called Bruce Dickinson. You've probably heard me talk about Bruce quite a lot. Bruce was my mentor and as well my business partner. And I remember when I met Bruce, he was so inspirational because not only had he had a #1 album, but he toured the world with some of the biggest bands in the history of the world. Aerosmith, Bon Jovi, Guns N' Roses, ZZ Top, I mean, Bryan Adams, the list just went on. And I was thinking, I need to learn everything that you know, which is what I did. And then after a couple of years, he said he was going to leave ACM. And I remember thinking, I'm just not ready. And we were walking one day to a car park and I just said, look, I don't know where you're going, but I am coming with you. And he said, I don't know what I'm going to do. And I was like, I know, but I'm still coming with you because I'm not ready to learn. And I knew I was completely prepared to give up what I had, this full-time job at a very prestigious college in the country, in order to just try something new with him, whatever that would be. And that is lesson number 1. Lesson number 1 is you're gonna have to take a gamble because you don't know what's in the future. But when you are playing it safe, the problem with that is safe things happen. So sometimes you have to take a gamble. And I was completely prepared to drop everything and start again, not knowing anything about what the future held. And that was the start of something amazing. The fact that I was prepared to take that risk, take that gamble, drop everything and start something completely new. And so the idea of BIMM was born. We were going to take on the establishment, the company that had already been built, and there were 4 of us involved. And the first thing that we did is we got a design company to mock us up a brochure. In fact, I actually have several of these brochures right here. And this was actually the very first brochure that we had done. So it's got the Brighton Institute Modern logo. We wanted it to look like an album cover. You can see this. You can see that there's the 4 of us there. Look, there's little fat Damo right there. And that was all we had. We had a brochure and we had a dream. So there were 4 of us that started BIMM. I was the baby. I was 23 years old at the time. And that made up the team. And lesson number 2 is all about a team, because one thing I learned very much later on in life is the power of the right team. I've been involved in many, many teams, but looking back, that team was bulletproof. And there was a reason for that, because when you have a football team or a soccer team, you need everyone to do their job. So you need the person who has the skill to put the ball in the back of the net. But you need to have the skill of the person at the other end, who's the goalkeeper, to keep the ball out of your net. And everyone has their role, but everyone has to be skilled enough to do that role. And when I look back at this team of 4 individuals, we had everything that it took. Purely coincidental, it wasn't something that we'd thought about, but now we had everything from the authoritarian side of things, through to the energy, through to the big picture, through to the detail. Everything in that team made me think that if we'd have done anything else, it would have worked, because it was a team with no flaws. So have a think about your current team. Is it bulletproof, or do you need to add something in, or potentially take something away or change something? If it's not working because the team dynamic doesn't work, it becomes very, very difficult to take over the world. And you need that team to be bulletproof. Now, when we started BIMM, we had very little, and we had just come from another business, the competitor, which had just had $3 million invested into a building, and it was looking like a spaceship. Everyone walked around and was completely wowed by the gear and the 5-year history of everything that had been put into it. It just looked incredible. And what did we have? We had a desk and we had a brochure. That was literally all we had. And I remember thinking, how can we possibly compete on a level with a company that's just invested $3 million in just gear and a building alone? And our building is being made with literally holes everywhere, and we've got a table. And this was the building that we leased. This is the architect's drawings, and as you can see, the logos are here. So that was our building that was being built, but we couldn't get in because the builders were in there. So we were meeting potential students at cafes. That was the best that we could do. How could we possibly compete? So now I think of it in a different way. I don't think about it as how can we possibly compete? Because every single time a student came in and we sat down and said, what do you want to do? And we started to design their career, their outline of what they needed to do. And we had the knowledge. We knew how to help musicians build their careers. And now I look at it in a different way. Not how could we compete? It was like, how could they possibly compete with us? Because we are going to value every single person more than they've ever been valued. And that is another lesson. How can you value every single customer, every single client, or every single audience member, every single fan and every single super fan? How can you create enough value that they've never been looked after like that in their entire life? Now, I've made this sound so much easier than it actually was. I started a business with a charity computer. Oh, look, we sold it for $300 million, which absolutely wasn't the case. In fact, it got so stressful and so hard in the early days that I had a minor nervous breakdown. I remember going to the doctor because I had lost the ability to speak properly. And I remember thinking, people can't understand me because I'm slurring my words. And the doctor just said, look, you've got exhaustion. You have to slow down. This is not good for you. And I was thinking, I can't. I've got too many things to do. I have to wake up earlier. I have to go to bed later. I'm just going to have to sacrifice more. I'm just going to have to work faster and harder. And it was tough. You know, there was one year in particular where it was incredibly, very, very difficult with all of that sacrifice. But we did come out the other end and things started to look up, and you hold on to the positives. But there was definitely another lesson in there. The lesson of sacrifice. If you want big rewards, you have to have big sacrifice. The spoils go to the people who are prepared to work hard, to work smart, to stick it out, to get through those tough things, to battle on again and again and again, to go through all of the rejection. But if you can go through it time and time again, usually you're going up a hill, and at some point you get to the top of the hill, and then you start to go down the hill. And at that point, it becomes very, very fun, very, very exciting, and things start to get away from you a lot faster than you're expecting. So when we started BIMM, we had no idea what it would grow into, but we did know we wanted it to be the best it could possibly be. And we worked tirelessly every single day on the 1% rule. And it's probably the best thing I took away from starting a business. The 1% rule is, how can I make something 1% better every day? If I can make fractional changes and fractional improvements, but do that every single day, then those tiny changes mount up over a period of time. And I think I see this quite a lot with artists and bands and businesses, where they're looking at artists and other bands and other businesses who've been going for 5 or 10 years trying to compete with now, instead of trying to compete with the excitement at the beginning and putting those tiny changes and improvements in place. So it's like a marathon. You don't run a marathon with a few massive strides. You run a marathon one step at a time for hours and hours and hours of training. That is the purpose of the 1%. So how can you look at what you're doing and make 100 or 1,000 tiny changes? Now, when you start a business, you are told that systems are everything. In order to actually expand and scale something, it needs to have a system. Whether you're in a band, whether you are a business, if you don't have the same systems, it's very difficult to grow. You can imagine going on tour and using different gear every single night. There's more chances of things going wrong and it being a lot more stressful. If I go into McDonald's in the UK versus the McDonald's in the US, it's very, very simple. All of this is because it's systemized systemized, and you are going into the same thing repeatedly, which is how you scale. But what people don't tell you is about the people. The people are the lifeblood. The people who work with you, the people who work for you, those are the people who represent you. Those are the people who can make something happen. And systems are great, but replacing people is very, very difficult. And one thing I definitely learned is you need the best people around you, people that you can learn from, people that you can trust, people who will take the responsibility and run with it. The people are what make up anything successful. Now, during that first couple of years of the business, I cannot think of anyone I would have lost from that team. It was the perfect bunch of people. From the teachers, the tutors, the receptionist, the admin, every single person in that team knew the vision, knew what we were working towards, and knew their part in it. And they cared. They just cared more than anything to make something amazing. And that is a huge takeaway. When you're working with people, you need, at the beginning, you need momentum. You need that momentum to drive you forward. And if you need momentum, you need people who care. You need people who are willing to push and sacrifice to make something amazing. And with the people becomes the leadership. And the leadership is where you are at the front saying, this is what we are going to do. This is what we stand for. And whether you are an artist, a band, or a business, that to me is the most important thing. This is why we do this. Not this is what we do. This is why we do this, and this is why people will want to come with us. This is why people will listen to our music. This is why people will buy from us, because we stand for something. Now, over the next few years, the business started to expand and scale, and we took it out of the city we're in Brighton, and we moved to another city in Bristol in the UK, and that started to grow before it grew into Manchester, and from there it grew to other cities. Now, there were huge growing pains because trying to pick something up systemized and people-wise and move it to another city is difficult, and something I would liken to a band or an artist going on tour. Once you've taken over your city, that's great, but how do you then start to move it to other cities or other countries once you've conquered your city? And that proved difficult, but one thing I definitely learned was if you can conquer a small area, then widening it is much easier. The same thing with your social media. Everyone says about growing socials. Well, the first thing is your first 100 YouTube subscribers is the hardest. The 1,000 is hard, but not as hard as your first 100. The 10,000 is easier than the 1,000. The 100,000 is easier than the 10,000, and the million is much easier than the 100,000. And that sounds ridiculous that a million is easier than 1,000. But that first 1,000 is difficult, and then you get the momentum, and then you learn. So you're practicing to get that first bit of momentum off the ground in order to scale it. And then probably the most valuable lesson, the end. After 9 years of working at BIMM, it had soured. It had got so big that I wasn't enjoying. I was dreading going to work every single day. And to be honest with you, I'd probably become an absolute arse hat to work with at the same point. I totally admit it. But I got to a point where I just thought, this isn't for me. I remember the old days. It felt like being in a band where you were playing to 100 sweaty kids and thinking, this is amazing. And all of a sudden, you're just wishing to be playing arenas. And then you're playing arenas thinking, God, I really loved it when I used to play to 100 sweaty kids. And I just longed for those days. And I wanted to spend all of my time teaching and working with students and working with musicians. And I didn't want to be sat talking about financial decisions or accounting or any of those boring business meetings that I wasn't enjoying. And then probably the most valuable lesson of all, which is the time to leave. And I remember after 9 years of working at BIMM, it was time for me to move on. It just soured for me. It got so big and I wasn't enjoying. I was dreading going into work every single day. And to be fair, I'd probably become an absolute arse hat to deal with at the same point. And it was time for me to move on. And I remember the day where it ended and I went home and just thought, I'm not exactly sure what happens next. I left with no plan. And all I remember thinking is, I don't know what to do on a daily basis. This has ruled my life for so long that I don't have any routine. And the emotions were like, I was excited to do something new, but I was terrified because everything had completely changed within a space of an hour. And so I needed to find something new. And this led me to probably the most valuable lesson, which is you are not defined by your failures or your successes, because they will come to an end and you will go on to do other things. And you are defined by the things that you do, the person that you are, and what you want to achieve next, and what you want to do next, and not just the fact that you were that guy in that band, or you were that girl who started that business. Your past is the experience that will lead you on to what you want to do next. And whether that is completely different or you want to go again, that's completely up to you. But you are not defined by what you have done. You are defined from this moment on. And that's the story of taking a business from literally a bedroom or a living room right the way through to selling it for $300 million, and who knows where it will go from here. But for me, what I love to do is I love working with musicians. It's the bit I have always loved doing. It's the reason why that I wanted to be involved in music education. It's the reason why I wanted to start BIMM in the first place, was dealing with musicians and helping you and other musicians work on a career and building and developing, because I was the same. I was the guy who just sat and said, I don't know what to do. If you tell me what to do, I'll do it, but I don't understand the music industry enough. Help me with it. And I love that, and that's been my passion for so long. So hopefully you got something out of this video, and I expect all of you to have $300 million businesses within the next 12 months now. I've told you my secrets. But if you can do me a favor, if you can hit that like button and that subscribe button, come and be a part of this community. And if you want to work with me on more of a one-to-one basis, then don't forget DK Music Business Academy. There's a link below. Is where I am. It's where I spend the most amount of my time creating new courses, working on live sessions, working in the community with amazing musicians. And if that's where you want me, and if that's what you want to do, work with me, then click that button below. Otherwise, I'll see you soon.